The Zojirushi Home Bakery Supreme Bread Maker fills your house with the warmth and aroma of freshly baked bread. This bread maker makes a traditional shape 2-pound loaf, along with cake, pizza dough, sourdough starter, jam, or even your own custom creation. To begin, remove the non-stick baking pan from inside the machine and attach the dual kneading blades securely to the rotating shaft. 2 blades ensure thorough mixing and kneading of ingredients for improved baking results. To make bread, pour liquid ingredients such as water or milk into the baking pan, then the flour. Next, add the sugar, dry milk, salt, and butter. To add the yeast, make a small depression in the flour and pour the pre-measured amount into it. Insert the baking pan into the bread maker and use the easy-to-read LCD control panel to make your course selection. The homemade course has 3 programmable memory settings, which allow you to set the knead, rise, and bake times. Select your desired level of crust darkness using the Crust Control button. An optional 13-hour delay timer lets you prepare bread at night and wake up to it freshly baked in the morning. Then press Start to begin. The viewing window allows you to watch the process while it's kneading, rising, and baking. Basic bread is ready in about 3 hours and 45 minutes, while the quick course completes in just a little over 2 hours. Cleanup is a breeze. The removable non-stick baking pan and kneading blades can be washed gently with dish detergent and warm water. And for storing, the recessed handles on the side of the bread maker make it easy to carry. Accessories include a full-color recipe booklet, instructional DVD, measuring cup, and spoon. The technology used in the Zojirushi Home Bakery Supreme Bread Maker may be new, but the anticipation of eating freshly baked bread never gets old. Zojirushi, inspirations from everyday life.
Hi, I'm Mary Rogers, and this is the Cuisinart Convection bread maker. It makes up to a 2-pound loaf. It's really great for consumers who want to make fresh homemade bread but are kind of afraid of the whole process of doing it. We make it really easy for you. First and foremost, you have 3 bread sizes, so you can make a 1-pound, 1.5-pound, or 2-pound loaf. You have the option of making light, medium, or dark crusts. And because I mentioned it's convection, it actually circulates the air around the bread, which makes for a better finished crust. It has 16 programmable options, and I want to call out a couple of them. First and foremost are our exclusive options, which are low carb and gluten-free, because a lot of people are following a gluten-free diet. And you also have everything from white bread to wheat bread to rapid French or Italian, and also even artisan doughs. You have the mix it in option when you want to add extra ingredients like cheese or tomatoes or, who knows, nuts if you're going to make a nut bread. The lid is removable if you wish, and also the bread pan comes out just by pulling up. And in here we have our paddle, which is also removable, and you'll have the option during the process of removing that so that your bread doesn't have a hole in the bottom when it's finished. So let's start making some bread. Today we're going to make beer bread, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's really easy to do. So first let's start with our ingredients. This is our water. Put that in the bottom. Next is the beer, and we just put it right in, bottom also. Next is the salt, sugar, and then the flour. I'm going to do this by using a scoop because I don't want to make a mess. So just put that in. The one thing I want to mention is that it's important to put the ingredients in the way our IB states it, because it's important to get a really perfect finished bread when you're done. And the last ingredient is the yeast. We're going to add that to the top. We're going to close the lid, and now we're going to program it. It's really simple. First, we're going to do our loaf size. We just press the button here, and we're going to go to 1.5. And today, we're going to pick our crust size. I'm going to do medium, so you just move the button once, and it goes to medium. And then we're going to do menu. And what we're going to do today is we're going to do a white. So we're just going to move this until it gets to number 1. So there you go, 1. And then all we do is hit the start button. And it's going to start making bread. Look at this beautiful beer bread. It'll go great with any type of grilled meat, especially sausages and mustard. And it was so easy to do. You really don't have to be a chef in the kitchen to make beautiful homemade bread every day with the Cuisinart Convection bread maker.
Making homemade bread doesn't need to be difficult. With Breville's custom loaf, you can bring a world of flavours beyond the bakery and add anything you want without all the preservatives.
It's as simple as adding your ingredients, selecting your loaf size and browning preference, and the custom loaf does the rest.
The intuitive LCD screen lets you scroll through 13 settings with light, medium or dark colour crust options, and it bakes up to 2.5 pound family-sized loaf.
The instruction booklet is a great place to choose from one of 44 step-by-step recipes.
Or you can customise a family favourite.
We're going to make sun-dried tomato and feta bread, which will use the default crusty loaf setting that can be also modified if needed. You'll see that there are 2 paddles. The dark collapsible paddle, that's for the bread, and that will collapse and leave less of a hole in the base of the loaf. And then the fixed paddle, and that's just for jam. To begin, always take the bread pan out
and add all the ingredients while it's out on the counter.
and make sure the collapsible paddle is in the upright position.
The most important thing to bear in mind when making bread is to use exact measurements. To start, get all your ingredients out and ready on the counter in the order that it's listed in the recipe.
And this always goes liquids, fats, dry ingredients, and finally yeast.
And everything should be at room temperature, since this can actually affect the yeast's activation and the way that the bread ultimately rises and bakes.
For liquids, only use liquid measuring jugs or cups and check the level while it's on the counter to make sure that the amount is exact.
So here we have 1.5 cups of water and 1 extra tablespoon.
Consider using filtered or bottled water because the additives in tap water can actually affect the way the yeast rises.
3 tablespoons of olive oil.
And for the dry ingredients, we have 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of vital wheat gluten, which actually improves the loaf height, texture and structure.
1¼ teaspoons of dried basil, 1¼ teaspoons of oregano,
and precisely 4 cups plus 2 tablespoons of bread flour.
This flour has more protein than all-purpose flour, making for stronger gluten and lighter, fluffier loaves.
With all dry ingredients, either pour the bread flour into a cup or add it with a spoon and then level it off with the back of a knife to make sure that the measurement is exact.
But don't tap the cup, since this will cause the flour to settle, and never use the cup to scoop directly from the flour packet, as this will compact it and you'll end up with extra.
and that will affect the doughy consistency. Lastly, we have 1 3/4 teaspoons of fresh active dry yeast. Active dry yeast works the best, but make sure it doesn't come into contact with wet ingredients, and this will ensure the dough mixes and rises properly. And be careful with the quantity. Too little yeast and the bread won't rise. Too much, it will rise, but then quickly collapse. And now add the ingredients to the pan. Got some liquid, and then the fat, and then the dry, salt, vital wheat gluten, basil, oregano, then the flour, and then the yeast. Be sure to wipe any spilled ingredients from the rim of the pan so it doesn't drop into the baking chamber. And now the bread pan's ready to go in. Just align the wing nut with the drive mechanism inside the baking chamber. Just lower it in. It may take a little bit of jostling, but it definitely clicks into place, and then lower the lid. And this recipe calls for sun-dried tomatoes and feta, which goes straight into the automatic fruit and nut dispenser. You can really jazz up any white loaf with dried fruit, nuts, chocolate chips, and seeds even, as they drop down at exactly the right time, and you don't have to stand by to monitor the progress. Any soggy food, such as these sun-dried tomatoes or feta, should be well drained and patted down dry on paper towel. If you have the dried packet version of sun-dried tomatoes, they'll work too. Now shut the lid of the dispenser and set the dial to crusty loaf, which will give you a crisp crust on the outside but chewy on the inside. There are no colour crust options, but by using the modify button, you could tailor the baking temperature or time for a harder or softer crust. And I'm going to change it to 2 pounds and then press select. And now press start. You can press the light to see inside the baking chamber as the dough cycles through. There's preheat, need 1, need 2, where you'll see the dough ball being tossed around by the paddle, and monitor the consistency of the dough because factors like humidity or flour measurement can affect it. 8 minutes before the end of the need 2 cycle, the automatic fruit and nut dispenser will release the sun-dried tomato and feta, and then the loaf will go into rise 1 and 2 with punch down modes, then into rise 3, and finally the bread maker goes into the bake mode, where you'll see the steam rise from the vents, which is completely normal. When the loaf's baked, take it out and let it cool on a drying rack for 20 minutes before slicing. If you try to slice too early, that can affect the structure of the bread. And with the 13-hour delay timer, you can wake to the wonderful aroma of fresh baked bread. The Custom Loaf, brought to you by the food thinkers at Breville.